Hello, everyone. Welcome to She Knows Arsenal. We're doing a live show today. Back to basics. Back to basics. We're doing a little bit of a live. I know I did a show earlier. You guys watched it. It was about like Ramsdale and like a little news update. We're going to have more of a conversation on this show, which I know you guys love. So make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. I have Shun, right?
Sheldon, you were close
Shown.
though.
Oh, see, I knew I was gonna get it wrong when we actually went live
No,
because I got nervous. No.
no, you're good. You're good. It's all good. It's all
But
good.
we have Shun from
Sheldon.
the Shun from the Touchy Gooners podcast. If you guys haven't been on the channel for a while, I've had a mixture of the Arsenal fans from the Touchline Fracas on my show before, and it was always a really good time. So I thought, why not reach back out because it's international break and we have to figure out things to talk about. So let's just rinse the same things over and over again and continue to talk about it over and over again. But everybody, welcome into our show and be nice in the comments. You guys know, let's be nice. Let's be nice. And how are you doing today? It's international break.
Yeah,
We're,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I don't watch any international football. Jess, I'll be totally honest with you. I watch a lot of trash reality TV show. This is like my time to binge whilst we're on the break. So I've seen some of the discourse online that Arsenal fans have been having today, and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely international break. This discourse, right? It's jobless
100%.
discourse. Like I'm like, oh my god, bring me back club football already. Like we got 2 weeks of this, so yeah, I'm gonna zone out and just watch some stuff that makes me laugh really. So
What do we mean by things that make me laugh? I know you always talk about like trash TV.
yeah, yeah,
What
yeah,
is your
yeah.
trash TV of the moment? This is
Oh,
my favorite genre, by the way.
yeah, yeah. I watch everything. So, my favorite trash reality TV show I think ever is Temptation Island. So I've
Okay.
loved that. I watched a lot of like the Are You the Ones, like Married at First Sight, The Ultimatum.
Love is Blind.
Love is Blind. Yeah, I watch Love is Blind. So yeah, yeah, no, just that was like very recent. I just finished watching that as well. So yeah,
Mm.
I live for that. So I know the guys will take the piss out of me in the group chat, but I don't care. I love that stuff. So it's like my
It's
guilty
good
pleasure.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
It
love
is.
it. People that act like they don't love it are lying to themselves.
Oh
It's
yeah.
so
To be
good.
fair, I used to be that person. Like my missus would be watching it. I'm like, what's this rubbish like you're watching? Like 20 minutes later, I'm there with like popcorn, like engrossed like in it with her as well. So you know the vibes.
Exactly. I love it. So yeah, like this is obviously it's not really my time to catch up on anything because I have to engage in the nonsense. So you'll have to partake for me. But on today's show, we're going to talk about Ruben Neves being linked to Arsenal. We know that Arsenal have had some midfield, if they have a midfield situation. So we're going to talk about that and the likelihood of Ruben Neves coming in, what you think about him as a player. We'll also talk a little bit about Douglas Luiz, who's also been linked to the club. And we have to touch on Nick Ramsdale going on to the Highbury squad yesterday, doing a little bit of an interview and saying some things that I think rub some Arsenal fans the wrong way. We'll talk about whether or not that's justified. The goalkeeper situation, I'm sure you have thoughts on Raya versus Ramsdale. We'll do that. And just to remind you guys, if you want to be a part of you want to enter the giveaway for 20K, the show for that or the video for that is on the channel. It's actually like the featured one. Once you go on the channel, click on that and it gives you all the information on how to enter. It's super easy. But thank you guys again for 20K and super appreciate all your guys' love and support and all that kind of stuff. Now you guys are probably like, shut up and get to the mess. So let's go ahead and get into it. So make sure you guys are smashing the likes. Ruben Neves. So Ruben Neves has been linked to the club. We'll talk about the likelihood and the logistics of it in just a second. But before we get into him as the player, if you had to diagnose Arsenal's midfield problem, what would you diagnose it as? Like, what would you say are the issues that are brewing in the Arsenal midfield? And is it just Partey not being fit? And if we had Partey available, everything would go to normal. What do you think?
I definitely think that's a factor. So I think one of the big aspects that made us so good last season was our ability to build up. So obviously we know that Zinchenko always inverted next to Party and build up last season, and they were ball progression magnets, both either through passing or dribbling. Now we've obviously, and Xhaka was there as well, so sometimes Xhaka would rotate with Zinchenko, right? But I think the way we've chosen to evolve this season, we've signed Declan Rice, who I think has been fantastic, by the way. Individually, I think he's been fantastic. However, he doesn't progress play the same way in Party does. He doesn't take the risks Party does, in terms of he doesn't look to see that pass through the lines as soon as possible. Takes a few more touches to get it out, and he likes to spread it wide. He doesn't pass, maybe he passes a lot outside the block rather than, Party's happy to receive under pressure, turn, take it on the half turn and thread it through to Erdegaard. So I think that's another point. I think Party and Erdegaard's form is probably intrinsically linked to Parties as well. But yeah, I think we've missed that a bit this season. I think the build up has been noticeably slower. Now I don't know if that's deliberate, because we're hoping to play like 50, 60 games, and you can't play at the tempo we did, when we were prioritizing maybe one game a week last season. So I think that's definitely a factor. But fundamentally, our midfield last season, right, was Xhaka, Party, Erdegaard. You knew that was the midfield that was going to play every game, fitness permitting. And obviously Xhaka's gone. Party's, he's got big availability issues, and we spent, nearly 200 million replacing that midfield. So I think naturally there's always going to be an element of teething problems, right? But the level to which these teething problems have happened has been a bit of a concern. That said, we're still only 1 point off the top, so this is really like a first world problem. But I think it is something that has to be addressed if we're going to be competing at the top end for most of the season, in my opinion. Because whilst I think, our expected goals against is the lowest in the league, we're defending really, really well. We're relying a bit too much on individual moments. I don't think we're creating as much as we'd ideally like in open play. So that's an aspect I think I'd like to see improve personally.
So the creating the chances aspect of things is something that I've been very worried about this season, just because even when we play two number eights, it doesn't feel as though we're getting more creativity. It feels as though we lack players in those eight positions that can actually get the ball and create something like the way that Odegaard does. And I know that he was kind of out of form, but it makes sense now that he has like an injury, that we can see maybe why he wasn't playing at his best. But we've spent money on Kai Havertz as well as Fabio Vieira. Why do you feel like they struggle to impose themselves on the game? Because I do, I just want to point this out as well. Like, people continuously tell me it's because they're not big enough or they're not strong enough or they whatever. But I watch games with like Rico Lewis and Foden and these guys. They're not big
Mhm,
players, so it can't
mhm,
just be that they're not big enough or strong enough, right?
mhm. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's too much of a cop out, and we've seen Arsenal with loads of tiny midfielders: Fabregas, Cazorla, Wilshere, Nasri, and none of these guys had a problem because their technical level was so high. So unfortunately for me, what I see, we spent 100 mil on Havertz and Vieira, but for me, a lot those two especially, they're not comfortable receiving it, in first, second phases, turning on the half turn and driving forward with the ball. So I just think they're very much final third guys, but we're already reaching the final third with how we're building, how teams are, defending in such a low block against us. But I think we just need a bit more ingenuity. And my main criticism with both of them, they don't play with enough personality. I think for me, they're far too timid. When you think of Arsenal creative midfielders, they're always very expressive, always looking to make stuff happen. And I just think they look to pass the buck a bit too much. And for me, that's quite damning, considering we spent the best part of 100 mil on those two, right? So I'm really, really disappointed. It's always funny. People accuse me of having a Havertz agenda. I don't have a Havertz agenda. I just judge on what I see. And unfortunately, based on what I've seen at Arsenal and the 3 years at Chelsea, I don't see how you can come away with a conclusion that he isn't it, right? Unless, and I'm massively open to being proven wrong, and I wanted him to shut me up. But based on what I've seen, I just think it's a lot of what I describe as toxic positivity, people looking to be positive for the sake of it. But based on what he's showing you, I don't see how you can come away with an assertion that this is the guy, right? Do you know what I mean? So he's been played at left centre mid. He didn't show. Obviously, Erdegaard's been out. He's been at right centre mid. But my thing is, he's a 65 mil attacking midfielder. Just like I'm expecting some chances created. We're not seeing much of that. Some shots on goal. We're barely seeing any of that. You just don't look a threat, right? You were brought in as a 65 mil is not chump change. If you take the Rice fee out, that would be Arsenal's second most expensive purchase of all time, right? So people are like, I'm being a bit too harsh, dampen expectations. But I'm like, no, like after a season where we challenged for the title, we've then gone and spent over 200 mil. So I think the expectation is that we're going to compete on all fronts, right? I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation to have. So I think certain players definitely need to raise the level. And I'm looking at Havertz and Vieira both there because, I even said on Saturday, I was like, wow, Erdegaard's not there. Emil Smith Rowe's injured. Jesus is not there, and Vieira still can't get a start. I know, and I said this last week. People were like, "Oh, Newcastle are way too physical for him." So I was like, "Sevilla Champions League. Oh, it's Champions League," and I'm like, "Burnley at home." They're like, so I'm like, if he can't, like, you're telling me like he needs ideal conditions to start. So like,
Yeah.
why did we spend the money, right? And one of the things for me I don't get is that like, why can we only use him in certain situations? We don't evaluate Declan Rice that way, right? Declan Rice will play every game that is available, right? So
Right.
we don't imagine us saying like, oh, you can't use Bukayo Saka in this game. If he's not available to be used in certain environments, then why is he here? Right? Do you know what I mean? We're talking about raising the level, so they should be able to contribute at any given state. At any given state, imagine like we never cherry picked Cesc Fabregas's games for him, did we? So I just So I have a bit of an issue with the allocation of resources that we've had, based on what I've seen so far. Because you know Vieira's had the year to bed in. You'd assume this year he'd be pushing to be more of a forward figure. So, and when you look, West Ham spent 10 million more on Paqueta, and look at him at West Ham, right? So yeah, unfortunately, I just don't think the eights we've spent, and we have spent. No one can argue that we haven't spent. We spent 100 mil on those two. They just haven't delivered what. And even if you wanted to add Jorginho into that, who I think is okay, he's serviceable at times, but
You
that's
don't like
120 mil.
Jorginho.
I so
Don't
I
front.
I think so. Okay, so cool. I acknowledge he's very experienced and he has his uses, but I think his lack of athleticism really rankles me at times, especially when it becomes a basketball game. And we saw it against Spurs. When games get stretched, we really tend to struggle. And again, it's me. People are like, oh yeah, but when the game is closed and we're dominating, he's fine. But I'm like, but that game state won't always be the case, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you can't affect game states. Like if you look at City Chelsea at the weekend, right? Rodri's fantastic, but look at what happened when the game got stretched and it became more of a basketball game.
Yep.
So I prefer players who are all weather players, right? Who can play in any situation, any circumstance, and you've got no worries about them. So that's kind of some concerns I've been having about the midfield.
Who is that? So who is that on? Because I mean, with the Havertz situation, it's like they made a big emphasis in the summer to say like Arteta really wanted this player. And then Fabio Vieira, 30 something million, 34 million on a player that we can only use sparingly. Surely there has to be some sort of change in recruitment or something. 'Cause first of all, I find it very strange that Mikel Arteta and Edu, two midfielders, cannot construct a midfield. Like I'm like, you guys know what a midfield looks like, you know? But do you think that there shouldn't be as much, I guess, of a leash for Mikel Arteta to bring in players if they're not working out at this level of frequency with this much money given to him? Because both of them are Mikel Arteta signings.
Absolutely, and he pushed for both of them when you could argue there were a myriad of other options, right? Mohamed Kudus, obviously, I know he's playing at the right wing on right wing for West Ham, but he's played centrally a lot of times before as well. 40 million, could we have potentially used that better? A lot of the stick to get that gets James Maddison 40 million as well. So, and these are just examples. I don't watch enough football outside of the Premier League to give you a raft of names, but I'm sure Arsenal had their scouts, right? You could argue, was this the best utilization of funds, right? Do you know what I mean? And as someone said, I saw someone tweet the other day, it was like, we legit signed Kai Havertz unprovoked. No one put a gun to our head to do that. That was the first signing of the summer we made, and we were happy to spend 65 mil. So I think the manager has to be judged accordingly. And for me personally, like I said, I judge it based on what I saw at Chelsea. It wasn't very good, Champions League final goal aside. And in the first 12, 13 fixtures for Arsenal, can we say that we've been massively impressed? I think people need to be honest with themselves. And I think, like I said, I don't really agree with just being positive for positive's sake. I just think I personally
Mhm.
think that's toxic in itself because you're not holding anyone to account. So you have to evaluate and judge fairly, be objective. And I don't think at times a lot of Arsenal fans are objective. They're like, oh, you got to back the manager. I 100% agree, and I 100% back Arteta. However, you can also back the manager whilst also questioning certain decisions that are made. Because
Sure.
whilst I think on the whole the recruitment's been good, it's not been infallible. You know, we chose to sign Cedric unprovoked. You know, we're still waiting for his contract to run out. He's still here.
Mm.
Pablo Mari, he wasn't great. Look, he played against Lukaku last season, and we've never seen him since. We had to get rid of. I mean, it's the truth,
Sambi,
right?
Nuno.
Sambi Lokonga, Nuno Tavares, not great. Let's not forget Willian was a massive red flag himself. So, and don't get me wrong, we can caveat it. I think there's also been a lot of good. And don't get me wrong, managers are going to get stuff. They're going to
Of
get
course.
things wrong, 100%. So you have to give them a bit of rope. They're going to get stuff wrong. That's fine. But it's more about addressing your mistakes quickly, firstly and foremost, but also having enough foresight. Like I think a lot of people would have said before, and this is why I don't really like with the Havertz stuff. Nobody saw how Havertz played at Chelsea and thought, I want him at Arsenal. Do you know what I mean? So some people would be like, okay, Chelsea tax, manager tax, maybe not the best environment. But I think once it gets to a certain point and you haven't looked impressive under various different managers in various different guises, it might just be, this is what you are, you know,
Mm.
and we haven't seen enough to say otherwise. So yeah, I think when you're looking to apportion blame, I think the manager has to hold a fair share of blame. 100%. And people don't like that. They say, oh, you're being too critical. You're not evaluating. I'm like, how else do you want me to evaluate? You know, the senior leadership team are the ones who chose to make these decisions, so they're the ones we hold to account, right? So I think that's fair personally. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, still very much have faith in the coach, but at the same time, I think I hold him accountable for some of these things that haven't worked out the way we would have liked them to work out.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think there's anything wrong with calling it how you see it. I think, especially if you have a clear eye view. And I think the most important thing that you said is that, like, you're open to the idea of your mind being changed. You would want it to work out. He's an Arsenal player. Like, I think some people just, they don't want certain players to work out, but I don't think that that's what you're saying. It's just you have to call it how you see it. He hasn't really, I don't think he's been horrendous, but he definitely hasn't set the world alight. And I think it's okay to say that at this stage. Hopefully it gets better from here. But in terms of Ruben Neves, you're saying that you like players that are like all weather players that can play in every single circumstance. Probably the, assignment we all thought was to get a better version of Granit Xhaka in that left 8 position, a passer, somebody with a little bit more, maybe a little bit more roundness to their game, less of a number 10, more of somebody that can just exist in midfield. In terms of, you diagnosing the problems in Arsenal's midfield with Partey not being there and things like that, does Ruben Neves, does he solve that midfield problem in January?
I think he's a better option certainly than what we have at the moment. I remember us, you know, when he was linked with Xhaka was supposed to go to Roma a couple seasons back,
Yeah.
right? And I think we were linked with Neves then, and I do like Neves. I think he's someone who can operate as a bit of a six and an eight. So you know, as a single pivot and maybe as a double pivot as well. So I think he's a good player. I do like Ruben Neves. Would he have been first on my list? Probably no. I'd like someone a bit more agile, because maybe I don't think he's as maybe. What's the best way? Is he more athletic than Granit Xhaka? Probably not. And that would in itself be a concern. So, but I think he's a good player. I think he's a very good player, and I think he fills a need that we have. He can, you know, I'm assuming in the summer we're going to let go of both Partey and Jorginho, so I don't think that would be a bad option per se. So I like him. I like him. But like I said, I think yeah, for an 8, I'm thinking of more. Who's a good example? Someone like it doesn't have to be him, but Mateus Nunes, who went from Wolves to Man City, he has the agility to turn under pressure, carry the ball from the first phase to the second and third phase. So it's more of having a bit of a press-resistant midfielder. I think a lot of our midfielders at the moment also don't like the ball under pressure. They don't trust their ability to turn
Right.
under pressure, and that's a bit of a concern for me as well. So who would have been my first choice? I don't know. I probably have to do a bit more research into that, but Neves isn't a bad option for me. I think he's a good player.
Yeah, I think people that have been on the channel before know that I have slandered this guy so badly for so long. Like, he's just not my type of guy. Like, I
You don't
just
like Neves? You don't like him?
no, no, because when we were linked to him, I was like, keep Jacka. Like, just keep Granite. Like, he's so much like Granite. Just keep just keep him. Like they're not that different. But, with keeping everything into consideration, the pros are basically he's a Premier League standard midfielder. So we know if he came to Arsenal, we wouldn't have to wait for any sort of like adaptation or anything like that. He knows the league. We know he can play at a good standard. He's a very good passer of the ball from deep, which, Arteta seems to really like and really works with the players that we have in those deeper positions. And he's really good at free kicks, dead balls, which is something that we do not have. I love Odegaard. Y'all know me. I love Odegaard. But he has not scored from a free kick since like Burnley 2 years ago. Okay? We need somebody that can put in some decent balls into the box. Somebody that can score off a free kick. So those are the pros for me. The biggest con for me is he's not press resistant. He doesn't solve that problem for me. He's another one that needs space and time on the ball. And maybe he has the Xhaka move where he can fall on top of the ball when he gets under a little bit of pressure and win a free kick. But, he kind of solves the problem, but not really in the long term. But that's why maybe a loan would work out. So Douglas Luiz is somebody else that we're linked to. Is he a better option for you? In terms of the press resistance, like more of like a number 8, because he does play
Mm,
more as a number 8 next
mm.
to Kamara in that Aston Villa midfield.
Yeah, I think I need to watch more. I wasn't overly moved when the link popped up a few years ago, but everyone that I like seems to big him up quite a bit. But again, we had what, a 25, 30 million bid rejected for him on deadline day. He since then
Yeah.
signed a contract, and Aston Villa have no real need to sell. So I'm looking at, is he a 60 million plus midfielder? I'd have some reservations spending that much on him
Hmm.
personally. Oh, basically what I'm looking for is like a Frankie de Jong, a Pedri type of midfielder. Essentially, that's what I would love Arsenal to sign as an 8, right?
Yeah.
So someone who has that press resistance, that ability to carry first and second phase, can help to drop into the pivot next to Rice to help build play as well. That's the sort of technical controller, creative 8 I would like. So now I've had a chance to think as well. So yeah, so Douglas Luiz I think is okay, but is he a level raiser again? I don't know. I don't know. And
Yeah.
for me, it's a case of, Arteta's now spent over 600 mil, I think, in his time at Arsenal. So I think we need to, the pressure definitely has to start mounting to achieve results, right? So, not to say that he needs to be sacked if we don't win, but I think there needs to be a certain level of pressure on to be competitive across all counts at the top level.
I definitely agree with that. Everybody that's been on the channel for a while knows that I feel like I'm not saying Arteta should be sacked, but I do think that we're getting into the territory of like, so what did you win? Like, that's where we're at, especially I'm looking at a very talented team. Like I can understand when we had Mustafi and them back there. I get that, but like we don't anymore. Like, so we need to be winning things. But let's see what you guys are saying in the comments. Saman is saying should have signed Louise in summer 2022. Then we wouldn't have had to sign Jorginho and Jam. Nashville says Paquetá is the one for me. If he eludes this ban, he's going to end up at Man City. I think we missed the boat on this one. We should have signed him originally, and
Mhm,
it's so weird. I think this is why people never really took to Fabio Vieira anyway,
mhm,
is because
mhm.
there was an opportunity to buy Paquetá in
Exactly.
that same window, and we didn't do that.
For me, I always look at him and Bruno G, and I'm like, they're really Arsenal players. They should have been like, we had two opportunities to sign Bruno G, and I watched a lot of Leon. Like he was there, Paquetá was there, Hussein Aouar was there. There were a load of very, very good technical midfielders who had the ability to step up, and we've ended up with with none of them. And you're kind of thinking to yourself, Eddie, you have the handle on Brazil, but
Does
you
he?
know, well, I mean, how how harsh am I allowed to go? Because
Listen,
we've ended up with Pablo Mari and Marquinhos. That's it, right? Do you know what I mean? From
I
someone who
mean,
was the Corinthians sporting director, we haven't really, that sort of market. You're looking at, and obviously I get we can't always compete with Real Madrid for like a Vinicius, Rodrigo, or an Endrick now, but there's some new wonder kids coming up. I've heard of someone called Gabriel Moscado who looks a decent talent, but
at
so at
Corinthians,
Corinthians, can we get as a 6 and an 8? Can we get some of that, please? But so yeah,
for
so
real.
we'll see.
Yeah. Social Join says, I don't rate Louise either. There's pure attacking eights or the Douglas Louise types. And That's something that we've spoken about a lot. You know, to me, there's a huge difference between Bruno G and Paquetá. They're two different types of players that can play in the 8 role, but they do completely different things. So it's up to what Arsenal are looking for. But as a template, Xhaka is more of like the defensive type more. He was running into the box and doing that kind of stuff, but really the two number 10s have never really worked for Arsenal. So I think I'd be more looking at a Douglas Luiz, Bruno G type than, you know, a pure attacking 8, because that just doesn't seem to have really, the balance isn't quite there, I think.
Because one thing with Xhaka was that even though, you know, his output was very good last season, he still did a lot of helping to build as well. Like sometimes he would rotate with Zinchenko, he would drop. And
Right.
one thing we can't, because he's gone to Bayer Leverkusen under Xabi Alonso and he's back to playing as like a deep line playmaker. Xhaka was always like, even though I had my issues with him in terms of press resistance, he was always a very good passer, both in terms of breaking the lines and hitting long passes. And, you know, when I look at Havertz, I'm like, you're not helping us build. You're not really making final third runs. You're not being overly creative. So I'm kind of like, and these were all things Xhaka was giving us, and we still had issues with Xhaka, right? Do you know what I mean? So I'm
Right.
kind of like, Xhaka gave us a lot more than you're giving us, and we still had issues. So I'm kind of like, this is why I don't really get why people are trying to justify Havertz at the moment. I'm like, we've had loads of good midfielders at Arsenal. We know what good looks like. We don't have to justify when it's not good. Let's be honest with ourselves, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, no, I hear that. Nikita says that Neves or Douglas Luiz would be great. Buy loan option in January. Already adapted to the Premier League, which I think in January you want to make sure that whoever you're getting is going to step straight into that locker room and know exactly what to do in that Premier League, because we don't need anybody that's like lost. We don't need that if we're going to get anything done. Nabil says, still get confused as to why he'd want to experiment with a player who's played as a striker for years and play him in midfield while failing to win the title. Just add more pressure to himself. It will always go down as a very speculative move to get Havertz. I don't think, unless it changes and turns around, it just will always go down as it could end up being one of Arteta's worst signings. Like it really could. Like, and it not even, nobody would even be close. Like,
well, pound for pound, definitely, because Pepe got a lot of abuse and he was not this bad. And he was not, and he had a lot more end products. Don't get me wrong. I'm not justifying. I'm not saying Pepe should be at Arsenal or whatever. Pepe was
no,
definitely
I
in
hear
his own
you.
right. But I don't think we can objectively look at what we've seen from Havertz so far and what we saw from Pepe. Pepe at least had end products, you know? So
Yeah. He was frustrating, but he at least scored a couple of goals here and there. So that's definitely true. So basically, for people that are like, where is this news coming from? This is coming from Alex Crook. He said that Arsenal are ready to hijack Newcastle's move for Ruben Neves. The Arsenal sporting director, Edu, is known to be a long term admirer of the former Wolves star. And from Ben Jacobs, he says that he understands. It's so funny. It's like, understand that Ruben Neves is open to a loan move to Newcastle. The deal could even be with an option to buy, but nothing will be clear until the Premier League vote on November the 21st regarding associated party transactions. So if you guys are kind of confused on what that is, it's like basically the Premier League clubs are going to vote to introduce a temporary ban on incoming loan deals between associated party clubs, and they need 14 out of 20 clubs to pass the motion. So we know who Newcastle are owned by, and in order for them to, it's kind of like that's the whole scheme, isn't it? It's, you know, the Saudi club buys Ruben Neves from Wolves. From the moment that they bought him, they had already started speaking about him going to Newcastle in January. And Newcastle basically can have like the Saudi club fund that transfer, then them get them on loan so that they don't have to use their own money in order to, so they can avoid FFP. That's the scheme. That's this, to me, that's all it really is. So the Premier League clubs are trying to make that not happen. Do you think the Premier League clubs will stop this? Do you think that they'll say, you know what, like enough is
I,
enough?
yeah, I think they'll vote against it. I think they'll vote against it. Because like you said, it is just another loophole they've been finding, because obviously a lot of people used Saudi Arabia as a loophole in the summer. Look how many players Chelsea managed to flog off to Saudi Arabia. I wish we could, but but
Yeah.
yeah, you know, it's another discussion. So yeah, I think they will, and I think that they'll block this from happening. So if you want to get, and the thing is, when I look at it, because obviously he's owned by Al Hilal, obviously same public investment funds owning Newcastle. I don't. I don't see why they would want to loan him anyway. So it kind of feels to me like what incentive do they have? They don't need the money. So unless the player agitates himself and says, you know what, Saudi Arabia is not for me. I'd like to go to England and be like maybe like a loan with an obligation would be something you could work at. We could work in, but yeah, and it's similar to like when people were talking about Douglas Luiz, I was like, why would Aston Villa sell him? Aston Villa sit like fifth in the Premier League, 3 points off the top of the table,
Yeah, they're
and
pushing.
he's one of their best players. They're not going to sell him in January, so yeah, none of these ones look particularly feasible to me at the moment, anyway.
And I think that's why a lot of people were disappointed with the business in the summer, which I understood. Like, I think I was a little bit more positive on the window than other people, but I could understand, like, we're in November and we're desperately looking towards the January transfer window to solve multiple problems. We haven't even spoken about a striker, and people feel like we have got to get a striker. And now we have this issue with midfield. People are talking about defenders as well. So I think when you look at our summer window, you can say that it probably wasn't that successful based on the fact that we're already, a couple months into the season trying to buy more players. Like, and in January, it's so hard to bring in anybody that's going to give you anything because, like you said, nobody wants to sell. And then the options that people want to sell tend not to be very good. So the summer window doesn't look like it's done us any that much good. Now, that's not saying I love Declan Rice, like he's been a revelation, but he needs help in midfield. We can't just rely upon him, and we're unfortunate to see Timber out for a long period of time. But before we get off this topic, I just wanted to ask you, like, if we don't buy a midfielder or don't bring somebody in, do you think our chances or hopes of major silverware are gone? Does it hinge, like, does all of our hopes and dreams hinge on bringing somebody in January?
Unless Havertz or Vieira start to show us a level that we've not seen, essentially. So if you're going to eschew that signing, because obviously, well, we're hoping Party comes back, but I'm done with that guy now. I don't believe, we need to get rid of him. I don't trust his fitness. Obviously, they're saying the new year, then he might go away with Ghana to AFCON. So I'm like, when are we actually going to see this guy? Um, so like you said, that puts a lot of pressure on Rice. Me personally, I really don't like that. People are like, yeah, Rice is never injured. Like he plays all the time. And I did research. He's played like at least 50 games in each of the last 2 seasons for West Ham. And I'm like, how sustainable is this? And even if you think he can, and he is a Superman, like, is that even fair on the guy to do that? Because we've seen Thomas Partey never really got injured prior to joining Arsenal, right, as well. So it kind of makes you think, do we overload our sixes a bit too much? Do you know what I mean? So, and cool, we spent the money, like he has to play a lot of games. Cool, I don't have an argument with that. But at the same time, protect the asset where you can as well. So
Yeah. He's
it's a
doing
fine
like a
balance.
three-man job in there, it
He
feels
is,
like,
he is, he
and
is, he is.
he's not really, I don't know. I think Odegaard comes back if he's fit, then that'll solve itself. But still, like, there's a big hole on that left-hand side that needs to be looked at. And really, until we figure that out, I think we're going to always kind of feel like we're winning despite
Mhm.
our midfield and not because of it. So you guys go ahead and get into the comment section, let me know, or the chat, and let me know what you guys are thinking about that. While we move to the next section of the show, which is Nick Ramsdale speaks out. So if you guys are, tired of talking about Ramsdale Raya, so am I. But we have to talk about it because that's the news, so we got to do what we got to do. Nick Ramsdale, I listened to the podcast that he did with Sophie and Kevin Campbell on the Highbury Squad. Very good channel. If you guys are not subscribed, you should subscribe over there. It's very good. But basically one of the first things that he did say was that he doesn't really care about whether or not people think Aaron is a good goalkeeper, but where he draws the line is questioning his character, and that's where he draws the line. Like, basically when Carragher said, like, he was clapping, and he questioned him as a person and like what his intention was behind that. As a father like yourself, like, I know you have like you have a youngin and all that kind of stuff. Like, can you understand the feeling of wanting to protect your family, your son, and stuff like that? Can you understand why Nick Ramsdale is so vocal about Aaron?
Absolutely. Your first thought as a parent is always to defend your child, but I think the situation I would be defending my child in is very, very different to where we are with Ramsdale as well. And obviously, this isn't the first time and we need to be honest. He needs to be honest. I think Ramsdale with himself. Like, to be fair, I can see two sides of the argument, right? Because from his point of view, you're looking like, okay, I've been the undisputed number one for 2 seasons. They've just got me to sign a new long-term contract. What's the issue? There's no problem. And you could
Right.
argue maybe it's a bit, but at the same time, the club are always within their rights to do what they think is best. If they think, that the guy needs competition, or you can bring someone else to challenge him, overtake him. I think they're well within their rights to do so as well. So, um, and this wasn't an issue for Ramsdale when he came and took Leno's chain, right? So
Yeah.
I just think you've either got to be prepared to put up or shut up. That's the reality of it. Me personally, I always thought the moment I saw those links to Raya, and I tweeted it at the time, I was like, Ramsdale's in trouble. I said it from the start, and people were like, "No, this is revolutionary. What Arteta's doing, getting two goalkeepers to compete." And I was like, "When have you ever seen two?" I said, "There's no such thing." I said, there's always a preferred number one. They were like, no, they'll share game time. I was like, no, there's a number one and there's a clear number one, and so it's panned out. So that's the reality of where it is and where we are. And um, I don't think the manager's going to change his mind. I think too much as, I saw a tweet, I think it was from Lewis Ambrose earlier today. He was like, once you've had 2 seasons and you still haven't convinced the manager that you're number one, like if the manager was convinced, I always say if the manager was convinced, he would have never looked at Raya. I think the fact that, and I think Ramsdale has been decent overall for Arsenal, but I also think there's been a lot of questionable moments. A lot of people reference the Southampton thing at the back end of last season, but there's also been a lot of other dodgy moments as well. So I think on the
Yeah.
whole he's been good, but I don't think he's infallible, and I think he's very much upgradable as well. And the manager has thought as much himself. So I don't. While Nick Ramsdale's always going to want to protect his son, I don't even think what he's doing is going to help the situation either. You know what Arteta's like.
Yeah.
I don't think
Me
Arteta's going to
neither.
be looking at this and thinking, "Oh, yeah, maybe I've been a bit too."
Yeah.
Just, I think this is just going to. Arteta's very stubborn. This is just going to push him even further into his way. So yeah, I
I could
don't think
see him
he's
going,
helped.
like, really dark,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
seeing some of this stuff, like, you know how Mikel is, but I think it's important to remember that Nick is speaking for himself, and he's not speaking for Aaron. He tried to make that very clear, and I have no issues with Aaron's character, mostly because I don't know him. I don't know him personally. We don't know these players for real, so sometimes I feel like, "Well, oh, we don't know them." We really don't, and, from what I have seen, if I had to, like, judge what I've seen from him, I think he's great. I think he has an excellent character. He seems like a really nice guy. I really like Aaron, so we're not really talking about him as a person. We're talking about the football, which is the most important thing. And I think it's also important to remember that it's not just Nick Ramsdale who has spoken out. David Raya's agent has spoke as well and said that when Arsenal bought Aaron Ramsdale from Sheffield, it was because it was easier than bringing in David Raya, who was the priority signing from then until the summer when they got their man. So I think there's a lot of emphasis on Nick Ramsdale being the one, like, agitating and all this kind of stuff. The Ramsdale camp is doing all these types of things, but, I didn't like that. I didn't like that he said that. I don't think that that was necessary. I think that's adding fuel to the fire. We all know the story. We know that we wanted Raya first and we got Ramsdale. I don't like just because it's not David Raya's family doesn't make it any less, like, tacky. I think that he said that. Do you agree?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I've got. I think both are a bit tacky. There's no need for this to play out publicly, but I think there was always the risk. What once you did this, because obviously we know Aaron Ramsdale has England ambitions. He wants to be England number one. Gareth Southgate's obviously come out and said, if you're not playing for your club, I can't guarantee that you're going to be on the plane for the
Yeah,
Euro. So this might even the way this has escalated now, it might even I didn't countenance it being a situation in January, but maybe this is something to watch out for. And it's not really ideal from an Arsenal perspective, like you said. We're looking at maybe a defender, a midfielder, talk about striker. You can't then be thinking about goalkeeper on top of that as well. Considering I think we already have FFP issues, which is why we didn't sign Raya permanently in the summer, right? So
right.
it's a bit of a shit show, so to speak.
I agree.
So
I
there's
agree.
yeah, there's too many yeah, it's a bit too chaotic at the moment,
Mm,
which is a real shame. But I think this was always the risk
I
of.
agree. So you'd kind of alluded to it, but it's not like Ramsdale was awful. I think that people feel like because he's been replaced, that Arteta thinks he's an awful goalkeeper. I don't think that that's it. I think Ramsdale is a very good young goalkeeper, but he has some flaws. And I spoke about the little interview thing that he did with Ian Wright, kind of talking about his lack of concentration that got blown up. But he also admitted that he didn't really like playing out from the back the way that Arteta asked him to. Like he wanted to, I think he said something like find a common ground or, figure out a way like, to whatever the word is. I forget what it's called. Like when you find like a medium point. It's eluding me now. But is that
Compromise.
yeah, that's the
There
word.
we are.
A compromise. Exactly. He wanted to compromise. Do people need to kind of accept that, like, Aaron Ramsdale has certain things that are, like, obvious, like, he doesn't wanna play out from the back the way the manager wants him to, and that he doesn't have the level of concentration, that those are viable reasons why Arteta might want a different goalkeeper, and it's not because he hates Ramsdale. I'm getting this feeling like people think that Arteta hates him. I don't even think
Mhm.
it's that.
100%, because I think there was some quotes I remember seeing from Raya in The Athletic talking about alluding to this as such. Like sometimes you see when we build up, right? Raya is almost like a left centre back in where he receives the
Right.
ball. He likes to, he talks about inviting players on, which will then maybe open up angles to play through the lines or play over the top. So it is almost as if it's legit 11 outfield players rather than 10 outfield players and a goalkeeper. So it has a lot of build up responsibilities. I think the average touches Raya has had since he's been at Arsenal compared to what Ramsdale used to average is astronomically different as well. So I think those are factors. And ultimately, I stand by it because as a manager, you have to be unwavering in your belief. So it's either they adapt to you, like the players adapt to you, or you adapt to them. But as we've seen sometimes with Ten Hag at United, once you start muddling your beliefs, you can sometimes lose the player as well. So if this is the fervent belief in what he wants,
Mhm.
then fine with me. So I've got no issue. And the reality is that yeah, you can't be telling a manager you want to find common ground. Like the manager's obviously got his principles set in play, and you have to adhere to that. Otherwise, you're liable to be for me. I've there are very few players that have an affinity. If you can be up, anyone can be upgraded in the team. Like that's just the reality. That's the realities of top level
Yeah.
sport. And we need to be honest as well. Arteta really changed Ramsdale's life. You were coming off the back of successive relegations. We can't be talking like you were the flavor of the month. And I think we built you up to a level where you have a market after you now as well. So you'd still be in a decent position. You're going to get a decent club when you want to leave Arsenal. But unfortunately, the managers just thought you're not where we want to go. You're not at the level I believe I need you to be at for where we want to go. And I think at the same time, the manager's perfectly entitled to that opinion as well. So
Yeah. Are you surprised that Raya has struggled as much as he has, considering he was brought in as this, Klopp said that he was a number 10 in the goalkeeper position. He's supposed to be very good with his feet. Arteta's asked him to play in this way where he's inviting a lot of pressure, but are you surprised at how much he's struggled? And if so, like, what do you think that is?
yeah, and whilst I've said what I've said about Ramsdale, I have to be honest. Raya hasn't really impressed me. Like he just generally hasn't. He's looked, especially in a lot of the big games, he's looked quite shaky. If I'm to be totally and brutally honest. Um, Now whether that's down to new club, higher expectations, getting used to the back four he's playing with, it's different. The requirements are different. He obviously doesn't have the same target of Tony to aim to up top, who used to win a lot of aerial duels for him. So there might be a myriad of factors. So yeah, I think he's been a bit shaky, so to speak. So, those who are still in the Ramsdale camp, they could probably, point to that and say, well, look, his replacement hasn't really set the world alight. But the
Mhm.
reality is he's got the confidence of the manager, right? He's doing what the manager wants him to do. So I think the manager will probably give him leeway for any quote unquote mistakes if he continues to follow the blueprint in terms of what he's looking for, in terms of how to play and yeah, how to be. So personally, I am always a bit wary of short goalkeepers, 6 foot goalkeepers. Yeah,
Yeah.
it leaves me a bit iffy. So if you wanted to ask my legit personal opinion, I'm not convinced by either goalkeeper if I'm to be totally honest with you.
I
And I
think
would
I think most of the fan base is there. I think
yeah.
most people that I've spoken to are like, I don't think Ramsdale's the guy, but I also am not sure that Raya's the guy. And I think based on what we've seen, you guys know, like if you've been on the channel, I completely understand why Arteta has made this decision, and I think it's the right one. I personally, I like as much as I like Ramsdale, I kind of sit in the camp where I don't necessarily feel like he's going to be good enough, you know? And I can understand why we brought in Raya. Am I surprised at how shaky he's been? Absolutely. But do I also see the aspects of things like, when he's at the Emirates, it's very quiet. And if it's not quiet, you hear murmurings of people being like scared of you playing out from the back. I've heard about that. I've seen that people when you're in a stadium and like everybody's like, you need to be Allison right now, or Ramsdale needs to get back in this goal. It's tough. I think it's really tough for him. But he's got to start putting in consistent performances at a certain level because it's not going to go away until he starts looking like the goalkeeper we saw at Brentford. We already kind of spoke about how Mikel's probably not going to like the comments that Nick Ramsdale made about, Raya not pulling up trees so far, which I feel like, do you really need to say that? Not cute. Don't say that. And also saying that Ramsdale is the cup keeper and he won't play unless Raya gets injured. And so that also basically puts Mikel in a position now where I feel like even though he wanted to go with this two number twos really fighting against each other, Nick Ramsdale basically put it out there for the world to know that it's not the case and put more pressure on Mikel. So I'm sure Mikel's not going to like that. Do you believe that Ramsdale is going to agitate for a move in January to secure a spot for England in the Euros? Do you feel like that's a real possibility right now?
I think so. I think so. Whether Arsenal will countenance that and whether we will get the offers we deem at the required level to sell are two different things. But I could definitely see him pushing because I don't see this situation changing. I think Arteta, the narrative he put out was that it was going to be a battle, but the reality is that I never thought it was a battle. I thought Ryan was going to
Never.
be the number one, and so it's proved to be the case.
Yeah, everybody that was like, "Just Brighton," I'm like, "No, I'm sorry." Like, it's just not that. Like, it's just was never gonna be that. And Arteta's done this several times already. We've seen that he does "You guys are gonna fight for the position." Emmy just didn't take the bait. Emmy did not take the bait. He was like, "I'm out. I don't believe you." Ramsdale wasn't quite, well, he didn't the window was already shut, so what can you do? But, would you sell him to Chelsea? If Chelsea came with 50 million in January, would you sell him to Chelsea? You would? You would?
50 million, absolutely. Yeah. How often are you going to get 50 million for a goalkeeper? Yeah. And one thing I think people need to, and this is something we need to be wary of when we're the market for where we're going to sell is the Premier League. We unfortunately they're going to have to be sales that we don't like that are maybe going to Premier League rivals, but those are the ones who have the most money. You're never going to sell Aaron Ramsdale abroad, especially for the money you're going to want for him, right? So that's I think us as fans, we're going to have to get comfortable with a lot of the big clubs are going to be doing it, like how we saw with the Havertz, the Mount stuff. I think those deals are going to become a bit more of a regular occurrence. So we have to get comfortable with that. So yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all.
It's like it's such an uncomfortable because the first thing you're thinking is, "Well, what if he bangs there? What if he's good there?" You don't the one thing I don't like about the whole Chelsea thing is that I don't like selling them our good players and thus selling them their deadwood. Like, I don't love this dynamic of a
Yeah, yeah,
relationship.
yeah,
It
yeah.
doesn't work for me.
We
Um
to this day, I'm still waiting for us to get a good one from Chelsea. We have going back from, I think Czech was a double agent, even William Gallas I never liked, David Luiz, Jorginho, Willie. I mean, yeah, we signed a lot of duds from them, if we're being totally honest. So
Yeah, it's been long. So for me personally, like it's it's not if, it's when we sell
mhm.
Ramsdale. I'm hoping it's not in January, but if you asked me and you said, "You know what? That 50 million could go to a midfielder, sell Ramsdale now to Chelsea and get it over with." I'd probably take it because they'll get him fine. Maybe he bangs there. Maybe every single time we play them, he gets a clean sheet. I don't know. But Arsenal need to sell somebody in order to potentially bring somebody in. And if it ends up being Ramsdale or something like that, then it's just going to have to be. But I do think that there is a possibility that Southgate might say, "You know what? If you're not playing, you're not making the Euros." And if that's the case, he will agitate. So you're going to have to. Um, let's see what you guys are saying in the chats. Reckland Dice says, come on, Georgie ain't been that bad. I won't put him in the same group as the rest. Talking to you, apparently, because we all know you're not a fan. um, oh, he said he'll be right back. I'll go through some comments while he's out and about. Babu says Georgie has been really good for us. I think in terms of how much we spent on him and my original breakdown and meltdown off of the back of that signing, he's actually been a lot better than I thought. The thing is, you just can't expect him to be something that he's not. He's a 30-year-old guy that never had legs, so he's not going to have legs now. You know what I mean? So I think Jorginho has actually been a really good deputy for us. He's probably been one of our better signings from Chelsea. Social Join says he will be good at Chelsea. Yeah, I mean, they love having their little vindication. Like, do you see what like Cole Palmer and Raheem Sterling were loving it? That whole like, get back, get my lick back thing that they were doing against City was just like, I don't want that for us, but I can definitely see it happening. Let's see. MD Agency says let him go to Chelsea. They won't win the titles with him as a goalkeeper. Actually, that's another thing is if you don't think he's good enough at Arsenal, then why would you be afraid of him going to Chelsea? You know?
Yeah. I think we need to, like I said, we need to change our mindsets on that. I think Ramsdale's a good goalkeeper. I do not see him as an elite goalkeeper like an Alisson. I mean, Alisson's the tip of the top, but even is he an Edison level? I don't think so either. So if you don't think he is, then yeah, he's got to go. Like I said, and in the Premier League, who else is going to give that to you? Villa have Martinez in goal. They're not going to be looking. Newcastle have Nick Pope. Spurs have just made a really good signing in Vicario. So I don't think a lot of the clubs that would give you the money you'd ideally want, they're not really looking for a goalkeeper either. So absolutely.
100%. All right, you guys. I have loved chit-chatting with you guys live. I miss this. So we're going to do this more tomorrow at 7 p.m. Same time. Hepta Views is going to be on. If you guys are not aware of his work, he's one of the best photographers. He does photography for Arsenal and other clubs now. So he's going to be on tomorrow, which is Wednesday. And then we'll do another live show on Thursday with Pedro from LeGrove, basically from the Arsenal Opinion podcast. So we're going to keep these rolling. And obviously you guys are going to get your 10 a.m. Arsenal news updates. If you guys, I know you guys like those as well, but it's been so nice having you on the show and chit-chatting.
Thank you.
Good insight, as I knew you would. And if you guys are not following Sean,
yeah, it's
no,
it's okay. It's at,
but
yeah,
where can they find you?
Yeah, you can find me at SV Carbaholic on Twitter. It's funny because when I tend to tweet a lot of stuff that people want to hear, I get a lot of followers. I've been tweeting a lot of stuff that people have not wanted to hear about Havertz, so I've lost a lot of followers recently. So
Really?
yeah. For some reason, people are being negative for no reason, but hey, like I said, I'm just objective. I just call it how I see it. Some people see it as positive, some as negative. So it is what it is. But yeah, if you like me, I do a lot of. I'm at the grounds most games. So if you ever catch me there, you want a drink, cool. But yeah, you either see me tweeting about Arsenal, moaning about Arsenal, or how my young son is driving me up the wall. So yeah, pick your poison. But yeah, thank you very
You're not
much
doing
again.
Project Mbappe or what?
He is far too lazy. But yeah, no, it's on the agenda. But yeah, I mean, it should be Project Saka really that we should be renaming it, right? So yeah, there we are. So yeah.
I love that. And I don't know who this is in the chat, you guys saying do a super chat. That is not me or some bot that I have asking you guys for super chats. You guys know I don't ask you guys for super chats. So I don't know who you are, but whatever. I've enjoyed all this conversation with you guys. Make sure you guys like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Also check out the video for the giveaway. Make sure you don't miss out on that. And yeah, the next time I'll see you guys is at 7 p.m. tomorrow. Talk to you guys soon. Bye, guys.